All right. All right, we're going to get started here in a moment. Give people a little bit of time to jump in. If you are here, feel free to say hi in the chat. Maybe share where you're from, what you're excited about, if you're attending AirCon at some point in the next few days here. It's funny because I planned out this month of audio jams before I realized the overlap with AirCon. But I hope that it'll be good anyways. A good supplement for people who want to check out some talks and then come and get some reviews, get some questions answered. Music Connection. Marco, welcome. Let's see. We'll give it just a moment longer here. I know a lot of people actually end up watching the stream after the fact, but we'll give it a quick second here. How are you guys doing this week? Well, I think maybe we can get straight into it, recognizing that today probably will end up being a bit of a down week because of AirCon, and appropriately so. AirCon is awesome. Love the team that's behind that. Good. Always could be better. Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. I woke up with a little bit of a tickle in my throat. So part of me is like, okay, hope my voice will stand up for the next couple hours here. But anyways, let's jump into it here. Maybe this is your first time. Maybe this is your third time joining for Audio Jam. This is just a free community event. The purpose of this is to make it so that you can get the job that you're looking for, improve your skills, that we can, as a community, just continue to grow together. And, it's a supplement to a lot of other wonderful resources that are available out there. If you don't already know, AirCon is happening this week, put on by Airwiggles. I mentioned a moment ago, there's some more people joining the stream, but I mentioned a moment ago, AirCon is awesome. The team behind Airwiggles is phenomenal. So definitely check that out when you get a chance. And in the meantime, because I'm expecting less people to show up to this event today because of AirCon going on, it means that you get kind of more specialized attention from me. So if you have any questions at any point, things that you want to discuss, feel free to throw them in the chat. And there's 4 rules for Audio Jam. And they are, number 1, that this is not for approval. It's for improvement. And what I mean by that is it's not about you hearing from me and saying, I am worthy now. I have been validated. That's not the point of this. The point of this is incremental improvement. So if you think you're a level 6, how do you get to level 7? If you think you're level 50, how do you get to level 51? That's the goal of this. The second point here is to see the framework beyond the feedback. And you'll notice that regardless of where someone is coming in their demo reel, like maybe they are at level 7, maybe they're at level 1000, whatever it is, I try to focus the feedback around the principles and the frameworks that make us good at our craft. And in so doing, that's applicable to everyone, regardless of where you're at in your career journey or skill set. And it ultimately gets to the fundamental of what it is to be really good at what we do here. Misinterpretation is information too. That is to say, excuse me. That is to say that there may be moments where I look at your website, your demo reel, whatever it might be, and I might misread it. I might see it wrong. I might click not where you expected me to click. I might drill down into a detail or rabbit trail into a detail that you didn't expect me to. That even by itself is a form of user feedback. And sometimes, as much as it can be frustrating, it can also be very revealing, the things that are working or not working about what we have made. And last, ego at the door. Learning is for the strong. That goes for you. It goes for me. Even this being the 3rd week of doing Audio Jam, I've been learning a lot from this process, learning a bit better of how to facilitate, a bit better how to answer questions, a bit better how to present and prepare in advance. And so learning is for the strong. And that's anybody who's here. That equals you. Let's see. Also, just be encouraging to each other. This is hard. This is hard to get your stuff evaluated. Obviously, because we're seeking out areas of improvement, it seems like a ton of feedback. It can even feel negative sometimes. And it's like, that's okay. But let's be positive. Let's be encouraging to each other. Let's applaud and cheer each other on. So today we have an interesting mix of both demo reels websites that we're going to look at. There's a handful of those. We also have a number of different questions about client acquisition, generalist versus specialist, creative process, cognitive overload, aesthetic continuity, and music composer demo reel rules. So you can look forward to those. I'm going to kind of sprinkle those in between, looking at demo reels and all of that fun stuff. Let's start off here. We're actually going to start with Trevor Whitaker Black. And Trevor is kind of interesting. He sent me a direct link, but then I've also found he has a different website link accessible through his LinkedIn, which is maybe on purpose, maybe not. This was the direct link that he sent, and he wanted me to look specifically at the music reel here. So let's do that together. Oh, sorry. Off to an interesting start. Okay, here we go. Let's watch this together.
In Pigeon Simulator, players need to take off and land very frequently. The music system I built combines dynamic layering with unique arrangements for flying and for walking. So here's what that looks like in context. As players continue to fly, more orchestral layers enter, lending a majestic feeling to staying airborne for a minute or more. The same is true in reverse. After a player lands, the music will switch over to the walking version of the next phrase.
Okay, so I'm going to pause there for a second. First, just now, I've seen Trevor's work for a little while now, and this piece of content that we're looking at is what I would call tell me more content. And you'll see from his website here, it shows up third in line, and that's perfect for tell me more content, right? Because as somebody arrives at the page, they're going to either look at like a main central video at the top, or in this case, all this social proof of like, I've worked on all these big IPs. As far as I can tell, Trevor is a little bit further along in his career, and he's learned how to present himself very well. And then you can see, even as I scroll down, there's more of this tell me more type content. So with that context, this is a great piece for tell me more. Obviously, Trevor's very skilled. He knows how to present himself well. He's good at speaking and communicating. I've seen that he's done a number of different YouTube videos and other things like that. And I would say for anybody who hasn't done any of that stuff, I highly encourage you to start. And it's scary. It's stinking intimidating. And frankly, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if it weren't for me starting. This was about 6 years ago, where I hated it. It took me forever to set up the cameras and lights. I looked and sounded like trash. I didn't know how to speak properly. It was a whole different thing, but I committed to lifelong learning. I committed to wanting to get better at communication as I went through. And this is a form of communication that has been tremendously valuable in my career. So getting back to Trevor and what we see here, it's really a question about presentation, because the content itself is good, right? He's done great music. It's a game that looks interesting and attractive. It's really a matter of like, are there methods for improving the packaging? Now, when it comes to things like this, where Trevor's trying to highlight, there is a set of transitions that happen to the music. If you and I closed my eyes, we probably wouldn't notice a transition, right? Because Trevor has done such a good and effective job of it. There's nothing in us that says, aha, there's the transition. I heard it. There's that moment when the transition occurred. So because of that, it's very difficult to present this and make an audience, especially a non-audio audience, to understand what changed and why it matters and the significance of it. Now, in an effort to address this, I see that Trevor's kind of put this, a little text cues that pop up and then eventually kind of go away. We are at this point 1 minute into the video, and I would say that works well, but how can we, this is a Disney expression when I worked there, how can we plus the experience? What is something that we can do to kind of elevate it just one more step? I think one way to do this better, I'm going to actually just turn off the music for a moment, is that when we get to our transitional state here, what I think might have helped tell the story of the transitional states a little bit better is some kind of lower thirds diagram that kind of showed you like an actual progression. So as an example here, whoops, I got to change all my cameras around. Wrong button. If at the in the lower thirds, if we reserve that space to show like, here's kind of like state A, and then that transitions over into state B and C, then there's a way to kind of tell the narrative and capture people's attention, because by having it there as a visual, state A, B, and C, you are also inherently communicating that there is a progression in the timeline. So stick around. With content like this, it's very hard to keep people's attention and focus. So, we're in the attention economy. It's kind of a helpful thing to look at that and consider, how can we keep people's attention more, and how can we tell the story of this progression in a stronger way? I don't have any notes or faults on the actual content itself. It's really just like, is there a way to present it so that when somebody says, tell me more, they click on this thing and they open it up, that they can see, oh, you're ushering me through a progression. If Trevor, he might look closely at his analytics for this video and see like, oh, people tend to drop off at a certain point. If that's the case and his stats are showing a drop off, that might be an indicator that he needs to package up the same content a little bit differently in order to tell that story a bit better. But for anybody here who's like looking for ways to potentially improve their site, I would encourage you to go check out Trevor, because he's done a really wonderful job of presenting himself and just his branding. I mean, even here is a little mini shout out. What a fun way to show some character and personality, to just show like, you're a good hang, you're fun to be around. I think working with you would be really, really cool, to just have an interesting headshot like that. Friendly looking guy, great content. Trevor, nicely done on this. You're killing it. You're absolutely killing it. Okay, we're going to do a little pause for a Q&A moment. I'm just going to get rid of these tabs here. And let's jump to our first question here about client acquisition. Thank you, everybody, by the way, for sending in your questions. We do have one more week of Audio Jam. So if your question doesn't get answered this week, hopefully we'll get it in next week. If you have any additional questions, feel free to DM me or to add them to the chat here, and we'll see if we can get to them. So this one is about client acquisition. In your experience, what has been the most effective channel to gain more clients? Is it website, social media, word of mouth, etc.? So when it comes to client acquisition, by the way, I'm using a little bit more of like sales and business terms here. And the reason for that is it actually enables you to go and research these terms yourself, find content, videos, tutorials, etc. on it, and start to formulate your own view on these things. It's that whole thing of like, teach a person to fish, or give a person to fish, feed them for a day, teach a person to fish, feed them for a lifetime. So some of these words, even though they come from outside of audio, I would highly encourage you to start looking them up. So client acquisition is a challenge for every business. Usually there's like client acquisition, cash flow, or fulfillment are the three key things that people struggle with. And for most people, especially in the freelance world, it's client acquisition. How do we get people to purchase our services? And even further than that, how do we get qualified leads to purchase our services? As an example about this, like you could find someone who they look like they're working on a really cool game. You would love to work on that game. You reach out to them and you impress them. You have great conversations. You maybe do a little demo or something, and they're just thrilled with who you are. And then you find out that their budget is like $5. It's like, that's devastating. Like I put in all this effort and energy and it's not actually getting me any return. So how do we handle this? How do we not only get leads is the sort of sales term for it? How do we find clients? But also, how do we nurture those relationships? I think that one philosophy that we can kind of roll this up into is the philosophy of solving problems, adding value, and service. So solving problems. You are hired to solve someone's specific problem. And often people don't even know all the problems that they need to be solved. And so you are their guide to solving the problem they think is right in front of them, discovering and handling the problems that they don't even know about yet, and bringing them through that process. In order to do that effectively, you need to have skills. You need to be able to promote yourself. Otherwise, they'll never hear of you and they'll never hire you. And you need to find a way to get what's called lifetime value from the clients on your list. Now, this language sounds very utilitarian. It sounds almost very like I'm just going to use people to get what I want. I want to be abundantly clear, even though I'm using the salesy terms for it. This is why service is so important. We are ultimately here to serve other people, to solve their problem, to help them achieve their dream outcome. And if we're not doing that, we're not going to get repeat customers. We're not going to have great collaborative relationships over time. We're not going to make ultimately the sorts of projects that we probably want to make in our careers. So getting back to the original question here, what has been the most effective channel to gain more clients? Website, social media, word of mouth, etc. The answer is one that you're not going to like. The channel is the one that you are most effective at. The channel that you want to sell yourself on is the one that you are most effective at. Now, what does that mean? Now, some people enjoy getting on social media. You know, we just looked at, sorry, I'm forgetting the first name now, but Whitaker. Apologies. We just looked at his website and it's like, he's very good at website. He's good at presenting himself in that format. Other people, maybe not so skilled in it yet. Now they can work to improve that over time, and I encourage them to do so, but maybe they're better at working on Instagram. And that's a platform that works really well for their personality, who they are, what they do, and the way that they can represent themselves. For other people, word of mouth might be the thing. If they're a little bit more reserved and they're not too keen to get themselves out there, they might be the sort of person who one-on-one is really great. In which case, if you've done a project with someone, they're clearly thrilled with you and with your work, asking for a recommendation, saying, hey, would you write something up that I can put on my website or is directly on my LinkedIn or whatever other platform you want to be using it on? Would you be willing to introduce me to some more people? I know a few people over here. You need to make it as easy as possible for them. You are making a request of them, but any of these platforms can lead to work. I've heard of some folks where they were trying to figure out client acquisition and they just decided they were going to create some sample packs and put them onto the, Unity store. And that led to other work, custom work, and not just buying the sample packs. So any of the platforms is good and helpful. It becomes more of a question of what are you going to do to get good at it? Because whatever the platform that you choose or multiple platforms, you are going to go through a period of time where you need to learn it. And it's going to be probably embarrassing. It has been for me, for me, my main platform at the moment is LinkedIn. I'm looking at and considering how YouTube and Instagram can be a part of my strategy. In addition to that, I do attend conferences. This is not something I could afford to do at first. I'm grateful that I now have budget that can be allocated to that. But over time, you're going to kind of expand your abilities and see which platforms actually work the best for you. But be smart about it. Track what's working and not working. See what's within your skill set and go from there. Why don't we jump over to another review here? This is Brody Nilsson. Yeah, Nilsson. Portfolio Showcase. First, I'm just going to say this website is stinking cool. I mean, look at this. The background here is interactive. Clearly, Brody has had a really great career and has credits to their name, and it's totally working. It looks great. I love that my first action looking at this portfolio is just like clicking the big old play button. Really fantastic. And then I also like that right away it kind of tells me who Brody is and what they do, because something that I've noticed in some of these reviews is that you don't know who the person is, what their name is, and you don't know what skill set they have until you scroll down or go somewhere else on the page. And I think that the fact that Brody's name is in the URL, I get reinforcement of that information here. I know exactly why I'm here, a portfolio showcase, and I see that Brody is a sound designer and dialogue editor. Right away, I kind of know what the skill set is. So let's watch this together and enjoy. Here, actually, I'm gonna switch. Okay. So something that I bring up every single time is that people tend to have a 3 to 10 second bounce time. So the 10-second rule, it's like if somebody lands on your website, they click on something, are they going to be able to see your material within 10 seconds or better within 3 seconds? So here we have silence, silence, silence. And at the 3-second mark, we've started in the action. I would like to propose that having your name at the beginning, when I just clicked on your website, I've already covered the utility of your name. And plus, and this is a kind of harsh way of putting it, but I don't care who you are yet. I don't care what your name is, more likely than not. What I do care at this point, the first thing I care about is, do you have the skill set I'm looking for? So I would suggest that reserving the first 3 seconds for your name and with having no audio at all at the beginning is going to maybe make a few people bounce by accident. Not on purpose, but it can be a consequence there.
Yeah, we get it, Pseudo. Wow, look at this place.
Yeah, okay. Should have figured we'd be dropped in a Duffalo holding pen.
Shut up! Get moving and find the right package. I can almost taste my own planet. Yummy.
Sorry, we got a little sidetracked. Kill Pinkstock. Hey, stop. I am not the one who killed him. I am not, okay? Don't again. Just help us out. I don't want to die here. Good. Got the whole gang back together. Our target's dead.
Well, thank God you're here, Detective. Sitting all alone in a place like this? I'd never live it down if the papers got wind of it.
You and me, Spectre, we're two of a kind.
You're not as crazy as I am.
What manner of creature are you?
None of your business.
When you enter my realm, I will know everything.
Если мы не справимся, сознание коллапсирует, и в реальность вернется нечто другое. Ведь самое опасное место — это подсознание.
Lovely. So, nicely done on that, Brody. I think there's a couple things here that I want to just sort of highlight, things that I think that you did really well. I think as we scrub through it, It was great that you had the little breakdowns saying kind of what you did. I would be cautious about, even when I look at the screen, it's kind of hard to read all of this. And so, that maybe it's better if it's in the lower thirds, maybe if there's a little bit of a gradient background or a slightly faded black background, something to just make it pop. It's really great that you have the information. I'm just wondering if there's maybe a way to present it a little bit better. But overall, it's all the right material. If I'm seeing correctly from your portfolio, my understanding is that you've got a lot of skills across the board. Probably a lot of your big titles have come from you doing primarily dialogue editing and mixing. Now, I might be misinterpreting, so please, take that as data as well. A fun portfolio. I like the clip selection. I do feel like 2 minutes and 30 seconds is a bit long. I would be curious if you could distill it down to a minute and a half. And the reason being, if it's too long, eventually somebody's either going to click around at random, in which case they might see what you consider your worst clips for a section. So if you can make it more potent, that's an opportunity for people to have more of a guaranteed chance of seeing the main clips that you want them to see. Along these lines, something that I would encourage everybody to do when deciding which clips you're going to put into your final demo reel, consider what is the purpose of this clip. Now, this sounds maybe a little reductionist or simple to say it this way. But what I mean is, when you have a clip there, it's demonstrating certain skills. And I'm not just meaning, oh, this is my dialogue editing clip. This is my blah, blah, blah clip. I'm meaning that there are messages that are being communicated along the way that you want to consider. So as an example, we have this little sound designy clip here for what appears to be more of like a hyper casual game. Now, I don't know the specific game, so I might be making assumptions here that are incorrect. But what does this clip communicate? It's communicating a certain portion of the market, which is very different than, by contrast, we have a clip like this that, looks very AAA, sounds very AAA, etc. And so each of those is communicating something different. Some people, they don't want to get more games in the hyper casual space, or they might say, I want more of these games. Maybe they don't light me up on the inside. I'm not like super excited about them, but they pay decently enough. And so I'm going to do more of those. As an example of this, I do have some friends who they've worked in with slots and that kind of a thing. And I've not yet met anyone who works in slots who says, I love slots. They're my absolute favorite thing to work on. I never want to work on anything else. Most of them do it for a period of time, make some money from it, and then try to transition away from it. And I'm not sure why. That's their choice. They're doing that. So for them, if their entire demo reel is all just clips from slots, who do you think that's likely to attract? Who is the customer avatar that is likely or most likely to attract? More people who do slots. So if their goal is to do more slots, then they should do that. Their demo reel should be predominantly slots. If it's not, then they have to start weaning themselves off of that demo reel and eventually accumulate more clips that are in different genres. If they don't have personal experience in that in terms of their career, then that means doing redesigns. Find your ideal games that you would like to work on, games of this sort, and then do a bunch of redesigns of them. And then anything that's in your portfolio that is not communicating games you want to do more of, consider weaning yourself off of those over time. Another thing that I think is worth considering here, when we look at each of these clips and say, what does it communicate? There were a couple clips here from the same game where there's these talking guns, which is, I think this was the same game, but it's hilarious. So it's good because it's a high quality game and, it's really fun. Then we go a little further. We have another clip in that range. I would argue that this clip is a little bit more exciting and interesting. We see dialogue editor and audio QA. What was the role on this? Lead dialogue editor and dialogue mixer audio QA. So I can appreciate why, because the lead dialogue editor portion is there, that maybe that's why this clip is higher value. But, these two clips are maybe a little bit samey, in which case, if your goal is to trim down the whole thing, consider picking the one that is coolest and has the highest impact for your audience and has the most cachet for them, and kind of go from there. I would say that personally, one of the clips I enjoyed the most, I'm trying to scrub through here, it was the one, this one here. If your goal is to do more dialogue editing, then having lead dialogue editor at the front side totally makes sense. That might be your next step in your career. You want to do more of that, or you feel like you're going to stay in that zone for a little longer. If it was strictly, I want to get more sound design work, I would push a clip like this a little bit earlier on, because we're already a minute in and it's a really great piece. And I think it's well designed. One area of improvement I could see here with this clip, we've got sound design, Foley recording, impact recording, and mixing. It's a good clip in terms of it being fun. It's high action. It's interesting. And for that sort of genre, if you want to get more opportunities in that genre, it's a great representation. I do think it's a little bit white noisy, and it's also completely in mono, if I'm hearing correctly here. Oh, maybe not. Sorry. With a clip like this, what I would encourage you is to take the time to watch through your work. Well, actually, don't watch through it. Close your eyes. When you're listening to your work, close your eyes and try to imagine, do I know what's happening? Do I know when it's this person punching versus this person punching? Do I know when it's this character and their backstory versus this character and their backstory? By closing your eyes, it's a really great filter, a great litmus for, is my storytelling deep enough, rich enough, immersive enough? Now, depending on the project budget, it might have been like there's no time or space for that. They just needed punching and whooshing and whatever, and it's a little bit more generic. But that's an encouragement for you, is to consider looking at a clip like this and seeing if you can, pun intended, punch it up a little bit more. Anyways, nicely done on this, Brody. Very well done with presenting yourself. Your website is killer, and this is a really great demonstration of your skills. So let's see. What we're going to do here is let's jump over. We'll go to another question here. Okay, this is one that I get all the time. Generalist versus specialist. This is a little bit longer of a question, but I'm sharing this in detail because if you are struggling with this question yourself, I want you to know you're not alone. And that's this person is asking this. What advice do you have for someone with a broader audio portfolio like myself? I've heard a lot that people should be expected to specialize, but I've never really been that type of person. I like to have my hands in as many things as I can, in audio and otherwise, especially in times like this where aiming for a perfect position is just games, or the like is tumultuous at best. So for someone who wants to keep a bit of a broader appeal, what's the best way to present myself? I love this question. Thank you for asking this. I think that it's worth us diving into this in a little bit of detail, because I have met, this is hilarious and sad at the same time. I have met people who are generalists and wish they were specialists, and they're like, oh, that's the better thing to do. And then I've met people who are specialists who wish they are generalists. So what that means is neither of these is bad or wrong. They're just different, and different is okay. So what makes them different? What are some of the advantages? What are some of the disadvantages? I'm going to break it down like this. Let's see. We've got here, we've got our generalist over here. Actually, I'll put that a bit higher. I know. Hidden layer. What am I doing? We've got our generalist over here, and we have our specialist over here. I think that what the specialist has going for them is they have clarity on who they are and the value that they bring. That means that it's a little bit easier for them to market themselves. The generalist has to their benefit the agility. And I'm probably going to spell things wrong here, whatever. They have agility on their side, which is if you're on a smaller project team of some sort, having someone who can be the solver of all kinds of complex problems is really, really important, because a small team, small budget, like, you're not going to go out there and hire 20 people to do the 20 tasks that you have. You don't have the budget for that. You're going to hire one, maybe two people to handle those problems for you. So being a generalist is an advantage because of your agility. Now, in what situation is this clarity an advantage? Well, for specialists, clarity is good for marketing. It's also really great for larger teams, because there's more of this mentality of like, what's your lane? Stay in your lane, because that's actually helpful for the overall mechanism of production for you to do that. Let's see. What are some of the other things? What are the things that generalists need to overcome and specialists need to overcome? Specialists do run the risk, potentially, unless they love the way that they work, they run the risk of getting bored. Generalists, they don't get bored unless you ask them to do specialist work, right? If you ask a specialist to do generalist work, they might actually welcome the variety, but they also might get a little bit scared. So I think actually we'll put this as a sort of more negative thing here. Bored, scared, oh my goodness, of variety can be a thing. And not to say that they aren't lifelong learners, they could be, but they're trying to become the best of the best at a certain thing oftentimes. Now for generalists, something to kind of be careful about, and by the way, I do consider myself more of a generalist, is we have hard to market. It's hard to market your skills, because telling someone about the 20 things you do is way different than telling someone about the one thing that you do exceedingly well. They also, generalists run the risk of, getting bored, but through a different lens, bored of doing the same thing over and over again. So there can sometimes be this like chasing of novelty that comes with it. And in terms of your portfolio, coming back to the question here, what advice do you have for someone with a broader audio portfolio like myself? I think that I'll use the spear analogy. Even though you can handle a multitude of different things and maybe in equal proportion, your audience is looking for, more likely than not, the one thing that they are most interested in, followed by the subsequent things that they're interested in. So the tip of the spear, you have to consider, what of my 10 skill sets, 20 skill sets that I have, which of these is the one that is most likely to get someone through the door, where I can then show off the wider set of my skills? Which one is going to get them through the door so I can show off the wider set of my skills? As an example of this, sound design has kind of been one of the better tip of the spear things for me and for the work that I do. And yet my original background is in music composition, and I dabble in some voiceover. And of course, my team can handle anything from implementation to audio strategy, that like we can do all of these different things, but I can't sell all of those things. If someone who doesn't necessarily know audio is looking for support, they might just say, I need sound design. And when they say that, they mean music composition, they mean voiceover, they mean Foley and all of these other disciplines, but all they can think about is sound design. So when I'm communicating with people and I'm trying to quote unquote sell my services, I start by listening. I need to ask thoughtful questions to say, what are the problems you're trying to solve? What are the pain points you're trying to avoid? How can I best help you? Now, I might jot down along the way 5 other things that I see they clearly do need, and they just don't understand it yet. The good news is, as a generalist and with my team, I can come in and we can bring those solutions. But I think it's important to know that you have to meet people with where they're at, even if that's just an area of felt need as opposed to their area of greatest need. I hope that helps. Let's jump over here into another portfolio. We've got here, I hope I'll get this wrong. I hope I get it wrong. No, I hope I get it right. Ailsa? I think that's how you might say it, something along those lines. I'm so sorry if I'm kind of butchering it here. But we've got welcome to Sugarbird Sounds. Welcome to my portfolio site. My name is Ailsa Smith, and I'm a sound designer for video games and background in experimental electroacoustic composition. That's interesting. Audio post-production and video game sound design and implementation. Just starting off the top here, I do like the branding in general. It's nice that you have a brand. I would say you might consider making it pop off the background a little bit more, just because if you put this into grayscale, the readability of sounds compared to the background is a little bit thin, like the delta or distance between those sort of densities. I'm not a UI UX person, but like, just to make the readability go up might be a good thing. And I would just put this through the lens. Here's the principle behind it. The people who are coming to your site are going to be all different ages. Some of them may, in fact, be colorblind. Some might be a little harder of seeing. Even if they're not super old or anything like that, they might not be able to read super great. And to come in here and to not really be able to read this very well, it's a simple fix that creates hospitality for your audience. Just by upping the contrast between the background and the text, I think will get you there. The color palette itself is nice and pleasing and cohesive across your brand. So that's really nice. But yeah, let's punch up the contrast between these two. I would say also just the single speaker in the background, it feels a little bit generic. And because it's a brand like Sugarbird, having a generic no-faced thing, it makes you seem like a bigger company than maybe you are, which is not a bad thing, but it doesn't feel personal. Right now, I'm talking to a brand, and personal brands way outshine corporate brands. And I'll put some numbers behind this as well. On LinkedIn, if you looked up, Richard Branson is an entrepreneur. Maybe you've heard of him, maybe not. He's got a fascinating life story, and I encourage you to check it out and learn more about his bio. But his personal brand is tremendous. He has a massive portfolio of companies. As I understand it, he's a billionaire. So he's got a huge portfolio of companies, but his followership as a person is like 1,000 to 1 compared to what his company's followership is. So personal brands, it is a benefit. And unless you are a medium-sized company, such as myself, representing yourself with more of a personal touch, I think will go a little further than trying to have what appears to be more of a corporate brand. Make it personal. That's one of your advantages, especially when we're at that smaller level. Okay, let's do the sound design demo reel here. Now, I'm just going to keep saying it. First 3 seconds, we used it on your name. So far, the person doesn't care what your name is, right? That's, again, I'll just keep harping on this. That information is good. You can put it in the lower thirds. You can have it on a card at the very end. It's already on your website to begin with. So repeating it and using up those 3 seconds isn't worth it, even though you did a great job presenting it. I wish that this wasn't a point I have to harp on, but it is. Save the 3 seconds, put them elsewhere, nest it in the lower thirds, put it in the end of the video, and show your skills, because that's the question. That's the number one question people have when they first come to your site. Do you have the skills? Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. I love that the runtime is around a minute in length. I see here that we do have audio implementation. Let me just take a quick gander at this and then we'll go through some notes. Something that I'll say from some of the other demos that we've seen today and in the other live streams, I do think there's a benefit to you narrating your own work. The reason being, if Vector's high on personability and inherently it lets me get to know you a little bit better. Now, some folks, and I've been here myself, we might be a little shy to get on the mic. We might feel like we don't have the right environment to record and sound professional enough. If you have a cell phone and a closet, you have enough equipment to record a quote unquote professional voiceover. And I'll put a story to this. This was earlier this year while we were working on the Superman experience for Warner Brothers. I had to do some voice recording in my hotel room, and I just like made a bunch of pillows and things around a metal frame and just like, that's my recording studio. And frankly, it was good enough for the job, you know? So even if you don't have quite a treated room or whatever, get under some blankets, under a bed, in a closet, whatever it takes, grab your cell phone, just have it off access to avoid plosives, and record a great, cheerful, personable voiceover articulating your thought process and why you implemented things the way that you did. What you've got here is lovely, and clearly the intent is there with the text and everything you have on screen. That's all great, but there may be a way to sort of level it up, ratchet it up one step by adding that personable touch. Lovely. Great. I know that I was skimming there, but really nice job on that. It's good to have all that. I just encourage you to do a voiceover. That's great. Turning back here to your sound design demo, what are the opportunities here? We've already talked about the intro. Okay, let's talk about sound redesigns for a second here. I think that there's a couple things that we can do with sound redesigns to make them as potent and effective as possible. So there's a couple things. One is very much in the early days when we're learning and we're maybe just starting out. We can learn so much from trying to recreate one-to-one what was done in our favorite clip of choice. I'll give you an example from me. At one point as a music composer, I was tasked with creating backing tracks for a gig band. This was a band that, they would have 10 musicians on stage and they would play for some crazy wedding and that kind of thing. And they needed backing tracks. And before, AI and stem splitting and stuff like that, they had to do it manually and they wanted to do it properly. So I would listen to these songs and I would be like, I need to figure out how does that bass synth work? Like, what settings did they have? What compression? What EQ? What effects? What did they do to make it sound the way? Was it a portamento or not? I had to figure out all of these things. And because of that, I learned how to listen a lot more carefully and understand what made a thing work or not work. Eventually, what I would do is I would pan the original song, or if I managed to gather some elements of stems or something along those lines, I would pan it hard left. And then I would put my material, pan it hard right, and then I would tweak and finesse the EQ and compression and distortion and saturation and whatever until my stereo image went from this distance to suddenly it was in the middle. And that was when I knew I had, close as I could, a carbon copy of what it was that they created. And man, it sucked. And it really kicked my butt. And it was so stinking hard. But it was such an incredible lesson about what worked and what didn't work. So as we're doing redesigns, not only for the sake of you want to put your demo out there and you want it to be really great and get eyeballs and all that fun stuff, but I highly encourage you, consider doing a demo reel where you are trying to one-to-one what somebody has done with a certain weapon or vehicle or explosion or scene. What makes that thing as interesting and awesome as possible? The classic silence to explosion scene in Star Wars from Ben Burtt. I mean, like, how many people have just like drooled over how amazing that sound design is? Consider redesigning that scene and then do a breakdown video explaining it and post that on social media as a part of your promotion of yourself, showing that you love studying and learning, and this is just an appreciation of the craft. And like, here's also some really cool sound design and what your takeaways were from it. There's such an opportunity there to not only get a demo reel piece, but to also unpack the process of learning intimately the craft that you are doing. And so as we look at these clips, these are from beloved films and, you know, products. Consider, what did they do that was really, really great? What made theirs feel like it totally glued to the screen and was realistic? I will say the pieces that I enjoy here, the work that you did with the vocalizations was very charming here. And I'm wondering, was it Ben Burtt also worked on this? I'm not even sure. Wally, sound designer. Just looking at this off screen here. It was Ben Burtt. Yeah, and Ben is just like such an amazing designer of vocalizations. And so really cool. And I think a great sort of tribute to that skill that he has. I would say what I like about it is that you did capture the charm. I think in terms of gluing it to the scene, that's where you can look at the original, ask yourself thoughtful questions of like, okay, why did it work well? About the movement, the EQ, the distance, the reverb, the final mix and master, et cetera, and see what you can learn from the process. But very charming work on this, and especially the vocalizations. This second one here with the monthly sound design challenge, there's no visual for it, which totally is the case sometimes. And it is actually good because it's good to see like, can you create a story with just the sound? That's a very applicable skill for audiobooks and things like that. For the sake of audience retention, I would encourage you to consider looking up, you know, with your particular video software, can you do some kind of a moving waveform? Could you potentially just show your DAW and show kind of what's going on there? Just something to keep your audience's attention, because it would be a shame if they dropped off because they said to themselves, wait a second, where's the visual? Like, what am I supposed to be focusing on? Which could be the case. So we'll see, you know, how that goes. Skipping ahead here. I think especially this last clip kind of glued to the screen for me. This one here where she flies up. It's feeling very kind of naked. There's not a lot of immersion for me. And I think sometimes when we're doing sound design, we can be working in isolation and we just think, I'm designing for that element. And we've so mentally focused on a specific weapon or movement or aspect of a character that we sometimes miss like zooming out and just seeing the whole package. For a scene like this, I think it would have been really great to have a little bit more fully. I'm not really hearing, you know, he's wearing a whole bunch of like armor and stuff like that. She's moving pretty quick. She has these long, sorry, I'm sharing my screen. She has these long sort of tassels going past her elbows there. I am wondering if there's like something you could have done to make the character feel more grounded in the world. Also consider just throwing an ambience in there, even if it's pretty basic. It would just help to make it so that this is a real world in a real space. And even though you're designing, yes, for the specific weapon or the specific character, you might consider how can I glue it into the world and make it believable? Because one of the core reasons why we do sound design is immersion. Now, what is immersion? Immersion is us making a world feel real. Now, we know that these worlds aren't real. Like, this is complete fictitious. She's got wings and she's flying and like all of this is made up. So you're trying to make it make believe, right? You're trying to make it so that this is actually believable, and consider what you can do with your ambiances, with reverbs, with the placement of objects, with Foley. What an amazing way to ground a scene by doing a Foley pass in, you know, if you're in a bedroom or whatever, again, you can use the closet and whatever, just record, get that real sound source for the Foley movements right away. I think that it could take a scene like this and elevate it. So yeah, anyways, thank you so much for sharing this. Very nicely done. All right, let's jump over back to some of the questions that we have here. Creative process. When starting a sound design project, what do you usually begin with and why? What do you usually begin with and why? I'll say this kind of as a foundation here. How you start often determines how you finish. And you think of someone who's a runner, right? How hard do they work to practice getting off the starting blocks, right? That moment, they have this twitch reflex thing. You'll see them practicing on the sideline to get that twitch reflex. How they start matters greatly for how they finish. Not just because it sets them up for success, it's because it's the mentality that they've started with is going to determine often how they finish. So when it comes to starting a project, probably the first thing that I do is listen. That is to have thoughtful conversations with the development team and understand the story and the purpose and the goals and like everything that they are trying to achieve, all of the meaning behind the characters that they've potentially even spent months already working on. I need to catch up to them and I need to understand that. The second step for me is research. And the reason why this is the case is because I am developing kind of like a lawyer developing a case. I'm developing a case for why I should make certain creative decisions later down the road. So I research, what is the genre? What is the thing that I'm actually creating and making? And I write all that down. I document it. Now, even in a simple form, say I'm composing music, even in a simple form, like just jotting a few notes in my DAW of saying like, here are the emotional anchors. Here's the genre of music that I'm in. Here are key signatures and rhythms and things that are most common in that genre. Here are instrument choices that I think would be most applicable. I kind of gather all of those pieces and it's sort of like filling the hopper in paintball, right? You don't actually get to the fun of playing paintball until you've filled the hopper, right? So that's the same thing for creative process. Then from there, I actually start production. I kind of get into it. Now, I may have unanswered questions that I will only discover by starting to build something, right? In the case of music, if we're trying to create the main theme for a video game or a linear piece of music, of video, we might still have to determine what are the main themes? Are these themes of the characters or the location or of the narrative, or are they the emotion of the audience or the emotion of the character? There's a lot of different lenses in which we can look at that problem. And sometimes you just don't figure it out until you get momentum. Now, in the case of music composition, sometimes it's great to just sit at a piano and start noodling with some ideas. Sometimes it's actually really great to research different genres. What have other composers or artists done in this space and have a sort of mood board of inspiration? Sometimes it's good to lean into temp music, using that to get clarity with a director or a producer to make sure that they know what they're actually shooting for before you spend production dollars making the thing, which can lead to frustration if you don't have clarity up front. Ultimately, this leads into us getting into full production where we have a lot of clarity on who we're trying to create, the world we're trying to make, the genre, like everything that all the rules of this thing, or a lot of the starting rules of this thing. And then we get into production and then we get into feedback and so on and so forth. Now, when I first started in music composition, but this is still very applicable to sound designers. When I first started, I was inclined to wing it. I thought that the creative work, the development work happened through my unique genius and when I was in production mode. So I would skip like all steps 1 through 3 or 4, and I would just go straight into production. I've since found that that leads to often a whole world of hurt on the back end, because I would bring pieces of work back to the game development team or a producer or director, and they would be like, what is this? I mean, it's a great piece of music, but it misses everything. Like it's completely off point. And the same could happen with sound design stuff, where it was like, I just went and gallivanted off doing my own thing, and I completely missed the point of the story, of the goals, of the world that we were building, of the immersion we were trying to create, of the emotion we wanted the audience to feel. All of those things could be missing. So where do we start? By listening, by researching, by testing out ideas, by documenting, by writing things down, and then we get to the actual creativity itself. Really great question. Really, really great question. So let's turn over here to another demo reel. All right, we're just going to pause again. What's our count? We're at 6 or 7 seconds. We might have lost somebody by then, okay? I got to try to not be too harsh on this, but don't use the beginning of the thing to share your name. They don't impress them and then tell them your name. It's very James Bond to do it that way, you know? Lovely job on that, Marco. And you've been patiently waiting there in the chat. This is really great. I think that it's clear from this. I'll share my sort of first reactions here as an audience member. I think that it's clear that you are skilled at the craft of like making the sounds themselves. I think that you've presented very well. It's good variety. One thing that stood out to me was this being 2 minutes and 26 seconds and it kind of having this clear breaking point in the middle where it's commercials and film. This maybe you have this on your website already if you have a website, but I do wonder if this should be split into two pieces, although I can appreciate if you have two videos elsewhere and then for the sake of sending it along here, sending it in one package is pretty solid. But 2 minutes, 26 seconds, it's a little tricky because you do start to just wane. And this is where if somebody is looking for something very specific in your skill set, like they're looking for you on the commercials and film side, clicking on that demo reel, they're able to self-select in your library of options, and that's a bit empowering for them. Whereas having it here, if they were looking for commercials and film, but that starts at the 1 minute mark, it could be confusing for some people. Not all people. You'd hope that they would poke around a little bit, but I think there may be a way that you can segment your portfolio a little bit and try to go after those two very different customer avatars separately. This kind of ties into the question around generalist versus specialist. You've shown a broad sense of skills and abilities, which is amazing because you are clearly skilled at them. But I am wondering if there's a way to separate these out, have 2 potent 1-minute videos as opposed to one kind of lengthy, drawn on 2 minutes, 26 seconds. In terms of the actual pieces themselves, we've talked about the intro. We don't want to waste time on the intro. We want to get straight into the action. If you did segment the thing, you would go straight, you'd skip the title card here and you'd go straight into it. You've just lost 6 seconds, which is amazing for just like getting straight to the action. Let's see here. The actual sounds themselves are really solid. I think that the part that is missing for me is a little bit more of that tension and release. And for anybody who's been on the live stream before, this is a common theme that I see in people who are highly skilled at making the sounds. It's really more of like the package and presentation. How do you make it so that this is bigger, punchier, more vivid, more able to handle me closing my eyes and understanding what's going on, etc., etc. So to get really specific here, okay, we have this little quick aside here. He fires a shot, charges his kind of hand weapon thing, and then I'm just going to say like force pushes the person into the wall. It feels like a run-on sentence right now because I'm not sensing the punctuation between these clips. Now, how do we make it so that our sound design is not a run-on sentence? I think we need to have clarity around where can we nestle the pause. And I'll share a story from my brother-in-law. He was in a band when he was in high school, and I was able to see his sister, who I married, is older. And so we were able to like come and cheer him on and celebrate him. It's funny because he's not a kid anymore. He's about to have a baby and he's married and everything else. But he was in a band. They did a bunch of different competitions and stuff like that. And he worked with a bassist. He was the drummer. He worked with a bassist. These kids were amazingly talented. And I was surprised and yet profoundly taught by one of the people who gave them feedback. It was a bassist and he was speaking to them. And he said to the bassist, "You need to let your bass breathe more." He said, "You treat it like an object, not like a personality. You need to let it breathe more." And he explained how a lot of the instruments that we have a deeper connection with, being, say the flute. The flute is one of the instruments that's, maybe the trumpet too, is closest to human speech, particularly more of a female voice. And it inherently needs to have breath. That creates pause. And when we pause, as I'm doing right now, it creates more focus, tension, and drama. So the same is true of our sound design, right? I'm going to do this with my voice. It's going to be a little annoying. But if I speak continuously without having any kind of a break, and I just kind of keep going at the same pace and the same rhythm and the same intensity and the same excitement, it just kind of natters on and on and on. There's no pause for emphasis, for processing the scene, for understanding. That principle is true of speech. Why wouldn't it be true of sound design too? It is true of sound design. And so something for you to consider is, by looking for those places where you can almost go to zero in your sound design, it's learning how to create pause. And then when you're speaking with your sound design, you can figure out, how do I want to emphasize, punctuate, segment my sentences as a sound designer to make them so that they are more impactful. And you can see I'm doing that with my voice. We can do it with our sound design too. So when we look at this scene where, okay, this happens super quick, and I know it's just frames to create a pause, but we have this gunshot and then he charges. There's a bit of Foley sound in there, the jacket movement, that is joining together these two sentences, right? These are two separate sentences. They're actually two separate paragraphs. Shooting the one character, charging up my weapon to attack someone else or the same character, however that goes down. Because these are two separate paragraphs, when you put that Foley, the jacket sound of the kind of whooshing up in the movement there, you've created no pause, which actually devalues the charging up sound. I'll put it like this. if we have the sort of gunshot moment like this in the waveform, and then we have the charging moment over here before he has an impact, right? Because he kind of slams him against the wall. That jacket sound is bridging between these paragraphs, which makes it so that instead of having this amount of sort of distance volume-wise between the peak and the valley, we don't have that. Instead, we have half of it. So as a result, this feels less powerful. But if we go in and we change our approach here, I'm not saying that having the jacket sound is a crime, but maybe you flick it and bring yourself as far down as you can so that you've saved all that power so that the charge up is super cool. And if you wanted, you could potentially do that same move again before the impact sound on the other side. So you can see here how, we have these separate sentences and paragraphs. Let's make a paragraph there, a paragraph here, and let's make it so that there's 2 sentences in that one and there's 1 sentence in that one, Let's make it so that these ideas are separate from each other to make them as powerful as possible. And that same principle applies across the board in a lot of this stuff. Your design work is amazing. Like, it sounds good. It's true to form. But, there's this scene here where I think they kick off the balcony. What a cool art style, by the way. Super cool. You have the, that bass droppy kind of moment, which is cool, but like, consider making that a separate paragraph from the kick. And like, get a little more of a like, I get kicked and then I'm hitting the railing with this, spraying debris, and then clench it before there's the wake up. Because that wake up could have been a full, like, like there could have been a little bit more of a, not that it had to be a gaspy performance. I think the asset itself is good. What you created was good. But is there a way that you can make it so that the contrast between these sentences and paragraphs is more significant? But anyways, just great design. I mean, I think that you're leveling up to that next stage, excuse me, is going to be pretty straightforward when you can grasp this concept. So nicely done with this. Really good. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. So let's jump over here. We do have a few more questions, and feel free to jump in the chat there. If you have questions or things that you're wanting to go through, feel free to throw that in there. So the question we have here is around creative process. How do you distill abstract narrative emotions into strict, immutable aesthetic constraints, priorities, and hierarchical relationships before a single asset is created? This kind of goes back to the previous question as far as, starting in sound design, where do you usually begin? Those principles of research, understanding the story, of talking to the team, and everything else, they're a part of it. I will say that creating strict, immutable aesthetic constraints and priorities and hierarchical relationships. There's a lot of $10 words in there. I'm like a $3 word kind of a guy. I think that I'll put it like this. While I was working on the Superman project and I was walking to the Warner Brothers studio, I was thinking about what is the role of a director. And I think in my early trips down there, I was not able to articulate what I could by the end of the project, which is by the end of the project, whether for right or for wrong, I think it was for right, I had an answer to any narrative question that would come my way. I knew the characters, the world, the meaning we were trying to create, and then that became a decision matrix for everything that would come up. So what you're forming is less of what are the answers to 10,000 questions. What you are forming is more, what are the 3, 5, 10 pillars that make this thing what it is at the exclusion of what it is not. And it's when you get clarity on that it's like sledding downhill. You're not climbing up the hill, you're sledding downhill. To get there is the hard part. Like, that's where the real work happens. So to answer your question more directly, I think that by focusing on story first and foremost, by focusing on audience second, if not first, and to focus on the goals of the project and team, that helps to form those kind of immutable aesthetic constraints. Research is a big part of it. I mean, I was working on a Harry Potter project and I needed to understand, what does the Harry Potter universe say about the rules around how spells sound? If you're working on an indie project, maybe even something hyper casual, and you have a character on screen that does some magic, more likely than not, you're going to pull for some, stingers, sprays, harp, sprays. You're going to have wind chimes and things like that. And there you're just like, bring, like, this is magic, and that's shorthand for a version of magic that exists with the audience. It exists in the zeitgeist. But I think when I was looking at Harry Potter, it was like, oh, interesting. The movies, they tend to emphasize more the reaction of the magic than they do the action of the magic. When you look at especially the first several movies, the sound design was very, like, it's very like whippy and almost slurpy, and like it kind of just had this sort of whippiness to it. And they never, at least in my research up to that point, they never, that I saw, went into wind chimes. So this was like, this is not your childhood version of magic. It's a little bit more mature than that. And then they would focus on what is the result of the magic and the impact of the magic more than anything. So as we were going through and doing what we were doing, creating these assets for this game and experience, we, eventually as a team, one of those immutable constraints was no wind chimes. Don't do it. It's just going to get rejected right off the bat, because that was a rule we had firmly established. Not all rules are easy to become firmly established, and nor should all of them be firmly established, because I think as a team, you're forming the design language around this thing, and you need to actually, come up with that together, yes, and then be the reinforcers of it, ideally as a team. And then, yes, the audio director will often come in and just be the one that kind of holds the line, which I think, yeah, okay, let's see here. Marco, thank you so much. He says, thanks a ton for your feedback. Totally right regarding breathing sounds. The base analogy and the way you described it sounds as sentences is gold information. I'm glad, Marco. It's, yeah, you're stinking skilled at what you do. So often, like, the difference between being, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent. I'm just going to cough for a second. A bit of a tangent, but I've thought through, what is the difference between Usain Bolt, the famous runner, and second place? And it's like, the genetics, the training, you could chalk it up to all of these different things, but eventually the thing that differentiates between first place and second place is somebody who has mastered the last 5% of their craft, right? And mastering the first 70% of your craft is almost the easy part. It's intensely hard, I admit, but it's almost the easy part because there's so much gains to be had. It's mastering the last 5% where we kind of need these little ways to just hack our brains and kind of figure out that next step. So I'm glad, Marco, that was useful for you. Let's see here. Let's jump over to, this was a late addition here. Hans Michael. And we have, this is a game trailer here. Whoops. I just realized I'd started watching it before the stream. Let's start at the beginning here. Lovely. So there's a couple things that we should probably talk about here. I mean, this is an aside here, but this is a great shot here. I think it just looks super cool. You look so boss with the beard and everything. Yeah. And I mean, there's great social proof here. I would encourage you to actually put some of these things actually earlier. Now it's interesting because I don't know the constraints of Railcrafter and what you can and cannot do. But yeah, I would consider putting some of that social proof earlier. Now it's interesting because I'm not 100% sure if the way Railcrafter works, if this is ultimately your whole portfolio or if you have other things. I would say if we're just focusing on this and the game trailer specifically, I think that it's really strong. There was something that I noticed about this, which you can validate internally, and maybe it's true and maybe I'm not interpreting correctly, but something that I noticed here is that the sound design itself and the music and everything, as I understand it, you're a composer. The music was all really great, but the final product felt like it was a little crunchy. It felt like the master bus was a little too much, which might have been completely out of your hands. Something that I learned from the amazing Toby Hulse is that it's really, really helpful within teams if you can have some creative control and license when it comes to the marketing material. The reason being, sometimes we hand over assets and it's just like we're told, throw it over the fence, give it to the video editor, let them take care of it. You keep going with in-game assets. And I love video editors. I love video editing, but sometimes they don't necessarily know how to package the audio in the way that was best. Maybe Hans, you might have had control over this, maybe not. But it just sounds like if I looked at your meters for your maximizer or L2 or whatever it is that you're using there as your limiter, it feels like it's slamming to like -10 or -15. There's something that's kind of crunchy that feels like it's just, there may even be compression on it because I think like the drums sounded very crushed and where the reverb tails in that were very forced kind of front and center. And this can be really tricky when you're trying to do a trailer and you're trying to make it as punchy as possible. How do we prevent that from happening? I mean, some of it is just on your mastering bus. Like I would not recommend going beyond -5. Some people in the mastering sphere would be shocked that I would even say letting a limiter go to -5, where it's dipping it by -5. They would be maybe more comfortable with 2 to 3. But yeah, I feel like it's a little bit crunchy and there's a few moments, even one where I felt like there was actually a click or pop in it too. Now, the cool thing is this is on IGN. I mean, like clearly you guys have been successful and it's a super cool looking thing. The sound design itself and the music composition, like all of it's really great. But I do feel like the packaging might not be serving it as best it could have. Now, in terms of the other pieces here, let's take a listen to some of this music here. Actually, sorry, I realized the same mistake. I had listened to some of this earlier. Let me reload the page. I mean, it's clear that you're insanely talented. It sounds amazing. When I was poking through this earlier, I did feel like track 1 and 2 were very similar to each other. I think that can sometimes be a good thing, sometimes a negative thing. Now, mind you, because this is for a specific project, it makes sense that they're very similar and in the same design family. But sometimes this is just a personal taste thing. I think that going back to screen sharing here. when we're looking as composers to best represent our skills, and mind you that this is slightly skewed because this is specifically a page for this game, but I think that when we're thinking about the purpose of track 1, 2, 3, and beyond, I think track 1 is to just establish a few things. So establish who you are, how skilled you are, what you're amazing at, what is just like mind-blowing and probably energetic about who you are. Think of it like you're doing a set as a band for a crowd that doesn't know who you are. Is it good to like do something that's really slow and takes a long time to develop? Or is it good to maybe hit them over the head with something that is straight into the action a little sooner rather than later? I think that sometimes we think as composers, if I'm going to put a song on the demo reel, it has to be exactly the song that ended up in the final project. I don't think that's true. I think that we can actually trim it down, we can edit it, we can make modifications to the songs themselves so that the best part of the song is first, so that there's a little bit more punch and energy, especially when we're here at this first step and we're trying to establish ourselves. Now, as far as the second one is concerned, I think reinforce, I'm probably spelling that wrong, and the second track, I think it makes sense for it to, be somewhat continuous with a certain skill set that you specialize in, and further the narrative of what you are and who you are, to say, I'm really good at this genre of fantasy, ethereal, deeply emotional music. And I can add a little bit of spice and a little hint of that, kind of 20 to 40% extra, where you're continuing the narrative of kind of who you are. By the time we get to the third track, which may be the last track they decide to click on, I think that it's kind of like a bridge in a song. You know how like the verse and the chorus are developing on similar themes, but it continues the story? That's kind of what your first and second track are. The third track is kind of like the bridge, where it's like, I'm going to introduce something that's maybe even a little bit further kind of out there. And by the time we get to the fourth track, I kind of like the idea of a wild card. Totally acing the spelling today. I like the idea of a wild card because you do, as a composer, you need to showcase a variety in the work that you're doing and your capabilities. And so sometimes it's like establish, reinforce, bridge, kind of new and interesting, but not too crazy, and then wild card. And then you can go back to some of the similar themes that you had in the first 3 songs from there, just to like not scare them off. But I just like that using the first 3 or 4 tracks to do that can be very helpful. Now, in this case, in this example, these songs are somewhat continuous because they're all from the same project. They're amazing and very synonymous with everything that I'm seeing here, and even with your aesthetic and everything. Super nicely done. Yeah, really, really great job. So then here we've got a few more questions. We'll see if I can get to both of them here. My voice is tiring, as you may have heard here. Get more water. Excuse me. Okay. Aesthetic continuity. Maintaining aesthetic cohesion across a large project is incredibly difficult, but perhaps the hardest part is self-management. As an audio director, what is your internal framework for self-regulation and the continuous improvement of your own creativity? How do you balance the urge to strictly dictate the how without the necessity of stepping back? Ultimately, I'd love to hear your approach to maintaining strict aesthetic cohesion across the board while still preserving the creative autonomy and individual voice of your sound designers within your overarching vision. Yeah, that's a great question. I think the reason why this is a great question, and I'm going to broaden it a little bit, is because this is not just a question for the audio director. It's a question for all of the team members too. I think that as team members, when we are contributing to the sound design of a project, if we are only thinking about our own self-expression, we are most likely going to encounter a lot of resistance in terms of notes, feedback, rejection, etc. And the reason being, if I told you that we were going to have a party at my house and the theme was, I don't know, astronauts or something like that, say that it was, well, all of these NASA projects were going on and we're going to have a NASA party. If you come up dressed in medieval dress, a knight's helmet, regardless of how amazing your outfit is, it just feels out of place. It feels like, did you read the invite? Do you know what we're trying to create here? So as far as giving autonomy to people, which I love autonomy and I want people to surprise me with what it is they create and they come up with. But if they're ignoring the fundamental design rules for what we're doing, it's kind of like ignoring that party invite and just be like, I'm a knight in space. You try to stretch it as if it fits and belongs. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's fine at a party with a group of friends when you say, that's Quirky Joe. He just does things that are weird and often different. It's very hard to, as somebody who runs a company, pay someone to just go and do something that's like so crazy and out there. It was a waste of everyone's time and ultimately of money. So creative voice, individual voice is super important because often, like when I was designing for Minecraft Legends, you want each character to sound different. And so when those tasks are doled out to different designers, the fact that they're going to come back with very different solutions to similar problems is going to automatically make it so that the stone golems over here sound way different from these characters over here. And that's a good thing. That's a huge benefit. But I think that as far as actually moving towards a cohesive goal, that's where us creating that design language together, frameworks, rules to the world, in the Harry Potter example of not doing chimes, wind chimes, establishing those things together as a group, discussing them, figuring them out is a way to empower everybody's individual autonomy. I don't want to rob them of that, while making sure that they don't show up to the party wearing a knight's outfit when they were supposed to dress like an astronaut. Okay. Let's see. Last question here. Music composer demo reel rules. When evaluating a demo reel, do you place more value in a range of genres or mastery or stylistic consistency within a specific genre? Similarly, do audio directors weigh live recording material more over mock-ups, even if they're expertly produced? Really great questions. Really great questions. I think that this sort of ties into our original question, one of the original questions about generalist versus specialist. So when evaluating a demo reel, every producer, audio director, so on, who comes to you is going to want something different. If I work for a studio, say that I'm the audio director at a studio, and we only make medieval fantasy games, am I going to go to someone's portfolio that includes medieval fantasy, hip hop, rock and roll, orchestral, John Williams, that does all of that? Am I going to pick them, even though they may have medieval in there? Am I going to pick them, or am I going to pick the person who specializes in medieval stuff? Now, some directors, audio directors and otherwise, they are trying to make something so unique and different that shooting for someone that's very different than what you would think in a certain genre or type of game can be a huge, huge win. Sometimes it's a total tangent and a waste of time and energy. So the thing that's challenging for you is you're trying to, maybe, I'm guessing here, you're trying to get an answer that's like, how do I get a job? And am I accidentally harming my ability to get a job by perhaps being a generalist or something along those lines? The answer is you're not harming yourself from getting a job if your skill set is that you're a generalist. So as an example for me and my own company, I'm a generalist. We've composed, just recently we finished a game called May or May Not, an indie game. And it had an album of 30 plus songs with lyrics in every genre under the sun. I was hired because one of the things I'm really good at is doing different genres. And so we were doing 90s hip hop and like French hip hop over here, and it all sounds like hip hop. We were doing opera on this song and Beatles-esque stuff here and Michael Jackson pop over here. Like we're doing all of these different genres, and my specialty and the people that I brought into the project is handling all those different genres. Now, I am especially good at some of the genres. I did those. Some of the other folks like Hudson Bakitschke, who's on my team, he's really great at pop production, among other things. He's amazingly talented. So, you know, we were able to flex into it, but we were hired because we have a diverse range of abilities, and that's what the client was ultimately looking for. Some people who are looking for something really niche are going to look for something really niche. People who are looking for things that are diverse are going to look for that. As for your second question, do audio directors weigh live recorded material more over mock-ups, even if they're expertly produced? I think that those are two very different skills. And generally, generally, I weigh those more on a budget spectrum than anything else. So I've worked on projects where there's been zero budget for a recording live musicians. There's been other projects where we've said, well, hey, let's allocate some budget to doing the top lines. Like we'll get a violinist, or, you know, we'll get some brass players or something like that. We can't afford to do the strings, you know? And then there's other projects where like they want the whole kit and caboodle and they had the money to pay for it. I think that your strengths in that regard are going to orient you towards certain games, sizes of production companies, and that kind of thing. So if your goal is to work in AAA, you knowing how to handle an orchestra matters a ton. If you're going to work in something that's not full on AAA, the hugest budget, that kind of a thing, they might love that your mock-ups are really great. And there's a lot of material in between. I know of a friend of mine that he was doing he was pitching for some Harry Potter work, and they specifically said, we're not hiring an orchestra for this. And you would think Harry Potter, like they have huge budgets. Wouldn't they do that and hire for that? No, they weren't looking for somebody who could do the orchestra thing. Now, this individual, he's really skilled across the board. So he was able to show them that he could do the full orchestra thing, but then also show that he was skilled at doing mock-ups and making them so they were true to life, as close as one can be in that regard. And so there's no right or wrong answer, which I know can be really, really frustrating. The main thing is play to your strengths, pursue clients that fit your strengths as much as you can do that, and serve the people that come through your door. So anyways, that concludes Audio Jam for this week. I'm sure a lot of folks are over there, and I would encourage you to go and check out AirCon, hosted by Air Wiggles. There's an amazing amount of free resources there. We're all in this together to get better at our skill and craft. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me. We're doing one more of these at the end of the month here next week. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.